Sunny's inventive and multi award winning theatre works have been presented in over 60 cities across the world and translated into six different languages. His wide range of audiences have spanned international arts festival goers, queers in, under, queers in underground warehouses, seniors in regional theatres, and young people in drop in centers. In recognition of his prominence in Canadian theatre, Sunny was selected to write the World Theatre Day message for Canada in 2019. Let's chat with Sunny Drake on how he is spreading awareness on climate change using humor. Sounds interesting, isn't it? This is the Guiding Voice podcasting, the guiding voice for a better future. I'm your host Naveen Samala, just a fellow professional on a mission to make the world a better place to live. And through the Guiding Voice, we drive conversations that matter and conversations that add value to your life and to your career. Thank you so much for joining me. Sunny, hearty welcome to the Guiding Voice. I'm super excited to have you today.
I'm so excited to be on the show. Thanks so much for having me.
Sure. Sunny, you have been a great theater artist and a multi-talented professional, and you have been recognized as one of the famous personalities in Canada. So, can you share with our audience the top three things that have attributed to your success so far?
Yeah, great question, Naveen. I mean, firstly, for me, having the right team. There's only so far I can have all the talent and all the drive in the world, but without the right team around me, there's really only so far I can go. So, for example, with my theatrical podcast that we'll talk about a bit later, Climate Change and Other Small Talk, instead of just writing a play on my own, I worked with 9 creative teams from around the world. And it's the talent and drive and skills and knowledge of those 9 teams on my team that then have, really sort of driven a bunch of success. And I find that across all of my projects, just my collaborations are so important. And secondly, persistence, 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 and specifically persistence in the face of rejection. Artists in particular, and I'm sure many of the other listeners in other fields, are continually faced with a barrage of rejections. As an artist, I'm constantly getting, no, your work doesn't quite fit here. No, we won't give you the money. No, this, no, 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 no. And from the outside, when people sort of look at some of the successes I've had, they're like, wow, you just get so many yeses, like you've got so much stuff happening. But what they don't see is behind closed doors, I'm continually getting no's and rejections. And so really learning how to not take that personally. It's not personal that someone's saying, no, this work doesn't quite match with what I've got going on here. It's like, it's learning how to just kind of keep on going and not take that personally. And for me, that's a bunch of practices with also making sure I'm getting nourishment too, and making sure I'm asking, my colleagues and people in my life to also validate, hey, keep going. Here's what I really loved about this and that and that. And then thirdly, I'm going to say thirdly is talent. And with talent, it's not some kind of like natural thing that just sort of descends like, oh my God, I was born a talented writer. That's something that I've really worked at, and I think there's a lot of myths around the arts, but potentially also other professions too, that you've either got it or you don't. When in fact that, there's some sort of thing flying around the internet that it takes 10,000 hours of practice to really master something. And I don't know if it's 10,000 hours or more or less, but it's certainly, for me over my career, I've really gotten much. I've honed my craft because I've put the work and time in to, to doing that, to skills development, and to literally sitting down at the computer and tapping the keys. Writing cannot be done without the discipline of sitting there and writing.
Yeah, good one. Out of all these, one which stands out is don't take no personally. And everybody undergoes that rejection behind the scenes, but we all see the other side of it. All the glory of all the S's are visible, but no's are not visible. Wonderful.
Yeah, definitely.
And, so, Sunny, I've come across certain themes, okay, at least in Indian villages and eastern part of India, wherein these artists like who are into folklore, they spread some messages, okay, which may benefit to the society at large, right? Likewise, over a period of time that has come down, but nowadays youth are into this role plays, doing that street acts in order to spread some awareness, be it related to adoption of children, or be it not to use the plastic, or be it saving the environment. Likewise, there are several different campaigns which run. So I would like to hear from you. What role do these artists and stories play in changing the world positively?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, art is so powerful at appealing to our values and at really connecting with that, all the layers of stuff that are in that sort of mysterious realm that sometimes it sort of can be confusing to go, well, how does change actually happen? And part of how change happens is when when you evoke people's values, and story is very powerful at getting right in underneath the sort of mental or intellectual defenses and into that more like that sort of bodily experience, which is sort of the layer that values play out. And I've been quite intrigued by some of the sort of research I've read, and for example, a book by Yuval Harari, *Sapiens*, that also looks
Mm,
at the at human evolution and kind of looks at the human brain. And somewhere around sort of 60,000 years ago, the
yeah.
human brain underwent a couple of key changes. Firstly, changes that made us more able to communicate more complex
Mm,
things.
yeah.
And secondly, we developed the capacity for fiction, the capacity to tell story, imagining things that didn't already exist. So
Mm,
prior to this, we could only change if either our environment changed and suddenly we had something new to deal with,
yeah.
or if some random genetic mutation that made us change. But now suddenly, or not suddenly, over many years, our brains changed so that we can actually have a much more profound impact on the world around us because we can imagine things that didn't already exist and we can communicate them with each other. And you need hundreds of thousands of people enrolled in the same story or the same vision before you
Hmm.
can actually make it a reality. Let's take money, for example. There's nothing natural or inherent about
Yeah.
money. We literally made that up. And
Yeah.
then we have enrolled actually billions of people in the concept of money. And so that's essentially a story. That's a
Yeah.
vision or a story that got told that now everyone buys into. So artists have the power, firstly, to reflect back some of these stories and go, hey, you know what? This story is not really serving us. It's
Yeah.
time for a new story. And we also have the ability to then communicate new visions or revive old visions, old ways of living, as well as new
Mm,
ways of living, and really communicate them in a way that cuts through the noise directly into people's value system. So it's a
mm,
pretty powerful
yeah.
way to create change.
Mm, mm. I heard a lot about Sapiens book, and this is one more instance where I heard from another guest like you. So I think this seems to be a powerful book. Again, it's been long pending on my list. I think this is compelling me to definitely go for it. And thanks for reminding that. And with that, let's move to the next question. So when it comes to climate change, science, politics, sports, likewise, we have many different fields. So, where do you think artists and storytellers fit in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for starters, to say we need the climate scientists. We have to have the climate scientists. We need the facts. We need to understand what's going on. Otherwise, it would be very easy for us to just kind of think, wow, like there's a lot of, rain or storm or drought or like what's with that? We need the scientists to understand what's going on. But we also, but facts alone don't change culture. Stories change culture, like we were just talking about. So we need the artists in the space that is, that's actually really working on, okay, dealing, for example, with our anxiety about, for starters, our anxiety about the climate, because most of us now know about climate change. Most of us now believe that climate change is human caused. and yet change is not happening quickly enough. So it's really the role of then artists to kind of go, okay, we've got the climate scientists,
Mm.
we've got the facts, and actually the bizarre thing is we already have a lot of the technology that we need to deal with the climate crisis. That's not the problem. The problem is the a very small handful of people who have a lot of resources unwilling to let go of those resources and shift away from fossil fuels. So it's really then it's our artist role to kind of enroll large numbers of people in being willing to sort of get around our own fears and things and touching people in a way that moves folks into action. And then I will also say that has to happen in partnership then with climate movements, with activists and movements on the ground who take the energy, like, so it's like the artists kind of change and then climate movements catch them and go, okay, now that you're feeling inspired to do something, here I've got, here are 10 things we can work on together. So that's, how science and artists and climate movements can all work together.
And also, can you tell us about your experience of working with an impact producer to channel the
Yeah.
audience into action?
Exactly. Yeah, great. So on climate change and other small talk, I mean, when I started the project, what I had really reflected on about my past works was often, I've always made work about quite political themes. And when I
Mm-hmm.
say political, I mean small p political, like themes of revisioning masculinity or looking at our housing crises, for example. What I noticed though is, okay, in my shows and the shows of my peers, we create these experiences where audiences feel moved and feel these things and maybe have shifts in their worldviews. And then we open the theater door and send them back out into the world. And okay, maybe for a day or two, they have this lingering sort of something or other. But where do we take that energy that they've
Mm.
had then and how do we translate that into action? So the job of then the impact producer, we've worked with a fabulous impact producer, Shaprice Henry, and her job has been to kind of look at the art and
Mm.
say, okay, what are the possibilities then for leveraging this into real world change? So
Mm.
she's then partnered with she's reached out to a bunch of kind of different climate organizing, and we are featuring some particular climate campaigns, so the audience can go, oh, I've listened to the audio drama, and now I want to do something, and so we've
Yeah.
got kind of pathways for them to actually go and do something. And
Mm.
also, I mean, our impact producer also had a hand in the art itself as well. So
Mm.
while our playwrights from around the world were writing these 9 different stories, our impact producer also read those stories and sort of was able to go, hey, oh, this bit you've written here, it really, there's this climate justice person who speaks a
Mm.
lot about that. You could read that if you want to kind of expand on that section. Or this bit here, I don't know if you realize it's sort of playing into some symbolism that you might not quite mean to be playing into. Here's some context around that. So
Mm.
kind of really having that support as playwrights to make sure that, the symbolism and the stories were evoking the things that we wanted them to.
And it also made me curious. How did you come up with the idea of working with 9 teams of artists around the world on this podcast?
Yeah, yeah, that's an epic story in and of itself. I mean, so I was increasingly concerned about the
Mm.
climate, like most of us are. And I went, right, I'm going to write a play. And so I got accepted into this artist residency, a very mind-blowing experience where I went on a tall ship in the
Mm.
high Arctic, like sailing through these ice sheets with 30 artists and scientists on board the boat. And we visited the world's northernmost climate research station up in New Allison, which is way north of Scandinavia, just 10 degrees away from the North Pole.
Mm.
And I met these climate scientists who are collecting all their local weather data and other things that are really essential in understanding the local picture of climate change. And while that local information is vital and very important, we also need the global picture. So they combine together their data with hundreds of other weather stations around the world. And we see that also in climate activism. It's this interplay between the very local and the
Mm.
global, which is so important. So we absolutely have to have it can't be a one size fits all. It's not a one size fits all solution. They have to be very micro tailored solutions in different areas, but also that we need global coordination. And so I went, okay, well, rather than me just writing my whole own play, what if I did the same thing the scientists were doing? Got these different teams from around the world to each look at what are the locally relevant kind of stories or questions they have, and writing these kind of micro local stories and then combining them together into this global project. So
Mm.
that's how kind of reached out to and partnered with. So our partner teams are in Australia, India, um, Mauritius,
Mm.
Nigeria, Chile, and then 4 teams across Canada.
Wow. That's amazing, and it's so inspiring the way you are trying to deal with this climate change and spread that message. You have gone that extra mile and making it as compelling as possible. And this brings me to my next question: why use humor about such a challenging topic as climate
Yeah.
change?
Yeah, great question. I mean, so many of us know and care about climate change, but I don't know about you. What I noticed started happening with me, I get the new, big report in coming through my inbox. I'd read the news, and it was really like scary. I started getting very anxious about the climate. And what I noticed was I just started kind of pressing next on the story on my I started kind of zoning out a little because it was so overwhelming to know where to start and really terrifying. And so, and I think, a lot of people want to engage with the climate, but it's hard to know where to start sometimes. So I was determined then with this series, and this is something that was a sort of parameter that I gave out to each of the playwrights was let's instead of kind of terrifying people with like you have to listen to this now or we're all it's gonna be over for all of us, instead of that, like using humor as a way that like these are episodes that you will actually enjoy listening to, that yes they deal with difficult things, but if we can make people laugh we can go so much further into the difficult content, because people also get the experience of, okay, release of laughter, and then you go a little further into difficult content, and then something funny again, you get to kind of release with laughter, and then it eases you sort of in and around and sideways through all of the terrifying things. So it's just a really different way to engage people that that is much easier as an access point for people who have found it hard to engage with otherwise serious stuff.
That is creative. Okay. Now, can you briefly talk about one or two episodes of your podcast?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got sort of everything from, okay, flood happening in a couple's home, but a fictionalized Amazon has taken over
Mm.
emergency services. I mean, what could possibly go wrong here? So there's a whole series of kind of, fallouts from that. Then our episode made by our Indian playwright, is set in a submarine off the coast of India. And the government has, instructed the submarine to seek out and destroy climate change itself. Like totally simple, right? Just plug in the coordinates and boom, it's problem solved. So okay, obviously not quite so simple, but Ram Ganesh Kamatam, who's the playwright there, was really interested to look at kind of inaction of government and specifically kind of a global cooperation or not. And then we have another episode where Nana and Pop in Australia have just learnt about
Mm-hmm.
cow farts from
Mm.
their granddaughter and how cow farts are contributing to climate change, and they're having their whole minds melted down in their learning process. So we've got a whole range of different genres and styles and content that looks at this serious
Mm.
content, from greenwashing through to international geopolitics through to co-optation of climate movements, but
Mm.
again, using story and humor and satire or absurdity.
Quite interesting. This has been great conversation, Sunny. Let's add some spice to the episode. I'm going to kick off a quick rapid fire round if you are ready.
Yeah, 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 great.
All right, so let's fire. Let me fire the first bullet. If you could have one gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say?
It would say, "What is truly worth your remaining time?"
So powerful. Okay, here comes the next one. Between invisibility versus super strength, which one would you choose and why?
Huh. I think I might go for invisibility because then I could like slip in and out of spaces and just suddenly be surprised and get into like spaces where big decisions are being made.
Wonderful. And again, that is also contributing to saving the climate. That's awesome. And can you describe yourself in just one word?
Love.
And what is the weirdest thing that you have ever eaten so far?
I grew up in Australia, so I grew up eating every morning yeast paste, otherwise known as Vegemite, which everyone other than Australians think is weird and disgusting.
Okay. Would you like to share any secret with our audience that you never shared anywhere?
I am a professional writer, yet I am a terrible speller, and I would not last a day without spell check.
Fair enough. And with that, let me find the last bullet out of rapid fire. Sunny, what is one electronic gadget that you'd like to invent or see?
Something that lets us communicate with trees and nature and animals, and that also means we have to then give those answers a seat at the decision making table.
Wow, so powerful. I simply loved it. That's so amazing. Great rapid fire round, Sunny. Let's flip back to the mainstream. And what will be your one piece of advice to those aspiring to make big in their careers?
I mean, I think making sure that your field you're working and your vision and your goals align with your values. So it can be really easy in our world of, kind of our fast-paced world to get taken away from our own value centers. So really taking the time to actually step back and go, you know what? When I'm like, hopefully, 80 years old or however old, am I going to look back and be proud of the decisions I made? And, so really getting in touch with your values and making sure that the things you're going to make big on in the world come from that center of values.
Awesome. Great advice. And thank you, Sunny, for that advice. And how was your experience being hosted on the Guiding Voice platform?
This has been great, Naveen. Like I've loved the questions that you've asked, and yeah, fantastic to get to have this conversation. And thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure to host you, and thank you so much for being part of the journey. I really appreciate your time as well as all the insights that you have shared.
Thanks so much.
Folks, that was our episode with Sunny Drake. And I wish each one of us should also contribute to protecting or saving the climate because it's already high time. And before we move into the trivia section, here is a request to you. Please subscribe to us in case if you haven't done already. Also, if you are listening to this podcast episode on Spotify or Apple, please follow and also, if possible, leave a rating or review so that we'll be able to reach wider audience. Also, if you have loved this conversation and found the episode useful, please share with at least three of your friends or colleagues who can benefit from the guiding voice. Thanks in advance. Now let's hop into the trivia segment of today's episode. And today's trivia is about climate change. Having had some intriguing conversation about how Sunny is doing his bit in terms of protecting the climate, I thought I would present a few staggering facts. I would like to begin with the first one, which is the global temperature on an average has increased by 0.6 to 1 degree Celsius till the 20th century. But going forward, the global temperature will increase minimum 1 degree Celsius from now on. And in case if we don't do our bit, it will further increase and which will lead to huge or rapid global warming. And here comes the next fact. The United States constitutes just 5% of the world population. However, it contributes to 22% of the world's carbon emission. And the next fact is around 15% of the carbon released in the environment is due to deforestation and change in the use of land. And the last one is The golden toad is the first species to go extinct due to climate change. This is all causing a lot of nervousness and worry to all the climate activists. And folks, here is my question. What are you doing to deal with the climate changes? And did you come across any best practices which contribute to saving the climate? Let me know in the form of comments if you are watching it on YouTube, or else if you have found this episode on any social media, comment there. That's all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And do not forget to share your topic recommendations or guest speaker suggestions through social media or email me at theguidingvoiceforyou@gmail.com. I'm your host Naveen Samala, just a fellow professional and a passionate learner on a mission to make the world a better place to live through conversations that matter and conversations that add value to your life and to your career. Until next time, bye bye. See you all in the next episode with another wonderful guest. Signing off for now.